Cool. So I'm just going to go for it. So firstly, I'm so happy that I'm not the only one in the world who loves data, which makes me very happy. I thought that I was the only person who did. And it was so nice to see that quite a number of you, signed up for this and were interested to see like what it was that I've learned over my time as a marketing manager and how I explained sort of marketing attribution and made some more profitable decisions over time. So yeah, keen to kind of share with you my learnings and keep the conversation going. So if there's anything specific that you're dealing with, I'm always happy to have the conversation. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out in the chat. A little bit, just to kick things off, a little bit of background about me and why I'm even talking about this. So I've been a digital marketer for the last 10 years, and my most recent roles, I was in marketing management roles down in Melbourne, and that's where I actually met Evan, hired Evan to work for me over a couple of years ago. And this time last year, I was literally tearing my hair out, trying to work with my stakeholders to understand and to get more clarity around our end of financial year targets, as well as sort of renegotiate some of them. So I'm sure I'm not alone in this. I was handed some super ambitious targets. I was told that there was zero wiggle room in our budget, and I needed to develop a super clever strategy if I knew I had any chance of hitting those targets. But even if you're not in the same situation and instead of like you're not necessarily given targets that you need to hit, if you're running your own business, you know that you've got some pretty ambitious goals, and we've got kind of full accountability on our ability to deliver on those goals. And it's one thing for us to have great intuitions and a lot of experience with what we do to try to get an understanding of, you know, we think we know what's going to move the needle, but being able to sleep well and sleep soundly at night, knowing what's going to move the needle makes the difference, at least to me. And having constant measurement also helps us to become better marketers, because as we're constantly measuring it, we can reflect back on what's worked well, what hasn't, and we add that to our toolkit as we keep running and keep growing. Can you guys see this screen well?
Yeah, it's all good for me, Kate.
All righty, perfect. We'll keep going. All right, so I knew that I needed to get full visibility over the effectiveness of everything that we had done to date from a marketing perspective in order to map the gaps and then forecast the likely performance of the changes that I might need to make in those next year financial year goals. So because of that, I became super obsessed with creating business intelligence solutions for like every business and every budget. So, you know, now for SBT, we are constantly running business intelligence solutions regardless of the size of your organization. The biggest thing that I hear from everyone that I talk to is our systems don't talk, which is the biggest nightmare and makes this process that much more difficult. But I'm such a big believer that anyone can become a more intelligent marketer regardless of your tech stack solution, whether we're using Excel and Google Sheets, which is what I'll be providing you guys tomorrow so that you have a starting point, or you're looking at, you know, fully live, gorgeous Tableau and, you know, Power BI dashboards that give you a live feed. Regardless of where you are in your business intelligence journey, everyone has an opportunity to start being really clever now. And just by using Excel and Google Sheets as the free tools that we have. So I'm hoping that even, you know, today, tomorrow, you'll be able to get started with this, plug in your own metrics and get full visibility over how to make some better decisions. So I'm just going to mute, there we go. So what we're going to quickly cover today is 4 key things. The first thing that I'm going to take you through is my marketing attribution formula. So this does 2 key things. It helps you benchmark your current or your past performance to get a snapshot of what worked and what didn't. And the second thing that it does is it brings visibility to the individual channels that are in your marketing mix and how they're performing and weighing up against each other. So keen to sort of show you that. I'll also walk you through a few examples of various things you could apply it to. The second thing we're going to cover is, okay, so we know where we're at. How can we map the gap between where our current state is and what our current performance is, and then where we would like to be? So we've obviously got some goals in mind of what we're looking for. How can we map the gap between now and the future and make sure that we bridge that gap? Step number 3 is forecasting the impact of those changes. So, okay, if we're going to make some marketing mix changes, how do we know that they're going to work or not work? And how can we, instill ourselves and our stakeholders with confidence throughout the journey? And the final thing is how we can win over the boss, because at the end of the day, unless you are the boss, we have stakeholders that we need to speak to. And even often, if we are the boss, we have teams that we're working with, we're reporting up and we're reporting down, and we need to construct an argument that turns boring data into an interesting story that's compelling and moves people to action. So I'm excited to share with you my process for that, and sort of what I've seen work and what hasn't worked for me over the years as well. So all of those things is how we're going to get to making more profitable marketing moves. So this is something that I say all the time, and it's just a good thing to keep in mind as we're thinking about our marketing mix performance holistically. So when we get bogged down in the detail of our impressions, clicks, and conversions, we can miss the bigger picture entirely. I'm a digital marketer, and I love that digital marketing affords us the opportunity to measure things very specifically. But at the same time, the downside of digital marketing being so measurable is that often it can be very distracting. So if we're looking at just channel attribution and just looking at whether or not, how many clicks we got and how many impressions there were, we can miss out on what the entire purpose of marketing truly is, which is to move people to action. But we often have stakeholders who want certainty and they want confidence. And I think up until I found this model and this way of sharing data with my stakeholders, I was dealing with stakeholders who, felt like they were just vanity metrics. It was sort of, how do you know what the ROI is on your content or on that billboard that we ran? And I really got a kick out of finding a way to navigate that conversation. And I hope that you find it helpful. So we'll walk through it. So yeah, just to kind of recap, it's not to say that those impressions, clicks, and opt-ins aren't important, but it is that we need to look at them alongside the holistic performance of our marketing mix. Otherwise, we're just saying goodbye to a whole bunch of budget and, really clever strategic decisions that we've made from above the line awareness campaigns. Maybe we've invested in a video, or maybe we've invested in a website build or a new app, or something that's really going to help lift the customer experience. How can we explain to our stakeholders the need to allocate budget to those activities? And how can we tell ourselves what the ROI is on those activities? And it's interesting because all of the conversations I have with many people in the industry tend to think that there's not a way to measure this, but I know that there is, and I'm going to share it with you. So I'm excited for that. So the first thing that we need to cover though, before I dive into it, is that there's 2 ways really to think about marketing attribution. And there's 2 different types of lenses and different types of reporting that we need to conduct as marketers. The one I'm taking you through today is marketing attribution, which is the holistic mix. There's also channel attribution, which is more, how do I understand which individual channel? So if I'm running Facebook ads, for example, how is Facebook performing for me within the mix? And we need to do both, but we can't really effectively look at channel attribution until we have a handle on how our mix is performing as a whole. So we're going to look at the marketing attribution today. So just to sort of recap and take things sort of back a step, the thing that I want to really do for everyone today is shatter the typical structure that we used to use for running marketing, for classifying marketing performance. I want to create our own lens for viewing what effectiveness is. And I just kind of stripped it right back. And when I tried to think about the way to explain this to my stakeholders, I thought, okay, what is really marketing's purpose in aggregate as a whole? And it really is, it makes it sound like our job's so simple, doesn't it? But it's really just to turn attention, find eyeballs, find eyeballs of people to be looking at what we're doing, turn those eyeballs, that attention, into engagement, some kind of meaningful connection with our brands, and then turn that meaningful engagement into some kind of action, whether that's, you know, anything from like an appointment and like a one-on-one conversation to usually a sale. So we're all sort of commercially minded here. So, I mean, that's the purpose. That's what we're trying to do. And the reason that I want to take it back and strip it back to that kind of top level lens is a few things. So the first thing is this allows us to start classifying our marketing activity in terms of appetite to buy. And the buyer's, like you've probably heard of the buyer's journey. It's when I was talking about sort of marketing attribution and then channel attribution before. The marketing attribution lens is really about the buyer's journey, whereas channel attribution is more about the customer journey and all of the different touch points that we engage customers in on their path to purchase. But when we can look at this sort of in aggregate, it gives us an idea of the total volume of people that we're dealing with here. And that, for a CEO or the boss that we're working with, or even our team, is a really empowering conversation, because we can kind of show them what the market opportunity looks like. You know, we might have thousands of eyeballs looking at us, and then of those thousands of eyeballs, how effectively are we moving them to action? Is the messaging compelling? Is it compelling them to want to create some kind of meaningful engagement with us, or isn't it? And if we can see that that's not working, and people aren't turning from just looking at us to engaging with us, we know that the product's not resonating or the message isn't right. So then we can make optimizations about our mix, and we can understand exactly where it is that we're going wrong and how to make those more profitable moves. And then the other thing that it shows us is also the number of touch points that are involved throughout that journey and the speed in which we're pushing people through. And I'll show you a little bit more about what I mean by that when we get to actually crunching the numbers. So this whole process is about creating benchmarks. If we are able to create a few Northern Star, I call them Northern Star metrics, to focus on, we then have an understanding at a glance of whether or not we're on the right track. And then if we're not on the right track, we can dive deeper. I think the biggest thing that I see that hijacks a lot of marketers and my clients and my peers is that we're just inundated with data. Like, there's so much data, and you know, that's fantastic, and we love being able to dive into it. I certainly do. I'm sort of the data geek. But my focus, especially, you know, the reason that I created SPT was about trying to help businesses better visualize what is the most meaningful data and where to sort of breadcrumb and start that journey. So we want to be able to just look at one or a few key metrics that tell us, are we on the right track or are we not? And then if we're not, okay, now we can dive deeper and we can kind of get an understanding and understand why aren't we? But if we don't have those few Northern Star metrics to look at, we're just constantly feeling paralyzed and we have no idea whether or not we're doing well or not. So I'm hoping that this provides that complete ease of, like, reduces anxiety now, because with this one view, you'll be able to kind of know, are we on track or are we not? And as I kind of mentioned earlier, this also answers that sort of age-old question of what's the ROI on that billboard that we installed, or that content marketing and social media initiative that we're investing in. So it's always been a very empowering thing for me to be able to go back and answer that question, because I'm explaining how the marketing mix is effective in aggregate as a whole. So here we go. Here's the actual numbers to help illustrate this for you. So it's important to note that whether you're an e-commerce business and everything's online, or you're kind of quite an established business where there's a huge number of teams involved and you're driving, you know, marketing qualified leads, and those leads are then going to a sales team for the sales team to convert them into action. Regardless of which business model you're running, this as a format works for every business. It's just about the way that you classify metrics, and you get to pick which metrics are most important to you. So you could pick hundreds of them. I think the most important thing to remember is to only pick things that you think are going to help give you meaningful insight into the effectiveness of your mix. The whole purpose of this report as a whole is for you to discern effectiveness. So like, of all of the things that I'm running in market, what's working and what's not working. So with that, the way that what you'll see is we've categorized things by appetite to buy. So instead of just looking at a channel, and as an example, in an e-commerce business, for example, Facebook might actually appear through every layer of this. We might have a Facebook ad that is a video, and that video is highly based on awareness, and we're just targeting the masses, and we're trying to introduce our brand in a really beautiful, compelling, storytelling way, but it's just trying to reach mass eyeballs, the right eyeballs, but eyeballs initially. Then in the middle, we might run some remarketing campaigns to people who watched that video or to people who engaged with our website. And that would be very much mid-funnel activity. And then we might have Facebook ads that are lead ads that are very much sign up or buy now. And that's, that's an example of how this doesn't mean that the channels, that they're layered by channel. You could have one channel that runs throughout your funnel. The whole point of viewing activity in this way is to break it down by the appetite to buy and where they are in the funnel. So like, are they having just seen us, or are they ready to take action? So that's how we're sort of viewing activity. And as much as, we've sort of got a bunch of metrics in here to give you an example, the most important thing is actually these benchmarks. So when I was talking about Northern Star metrics, this is what I mean. I really just want to see at a glance, at a point in time, how are people moving through the funnel? So for me, the benchmark for percentage is all about measuring speed and then the effectiveness of the activity. So that really is, of the percentage of people who we engage with their eyes, how many of them obviously converted to engage, and then how many of the engagements converted to action. But being able to look at the percentage, we can see how effective that was. If it was 100%, if 100% of people who were engaged, who we showed a video, then took some kind of action, that's showing that like we've done a pretty good job. But I don't think that's ever happened to me. Let me know if that's happened to you. The other thing, the other benchmark that we have that's really interesting is the dollar benchmark, so the revenue figures. So we want to know how effective it's been from like an actual dollar perspective. And as you'll see in some of these specific examples I'm going to show you, effectiveness and sort of the speed and rate doesn't necessarily mean it's the most cost effective, but likewise, having something that's really cost effective and having a really cost effective market doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right strategy for you either. And we'll go through some examples. So our job is really to just make some considered changes to the elements in the marketing mix and then reduce the whole number of touch points if we can. We know that if we reduce the number of touch points and we don't have so many channels running, or we have the channels running really, really effectively, we've reduced the cost to acquire because we haven't had to spend as much money to get more eyeballs and convert them more efficiently. And then if we increase the rate, so the speed in which we can push people down that funnel, and all of our messages resonate and they're really compelled by what it is that we are offering, then we know that we're pushing people through faster. So when our revenue is high and our percentage conversion benchmarks are high, when they're both going up, we know that positive changes were made and we made positive changes to the marketing mix. And when they don't, we know that whatever we just did didn't resonate. So that's when we're talking about making effective moves, whether, we're at end of financial year, and like I did, I backtracked and went and did this over the last, 6 months, not quite a year, but 6 months of activity to get a snapshot of, okay, what moves have I been making that were working and which ones weren't? Or if, we're just wanting to draw a line in the sand and go, I'm just going to start being more effective from today, by measuring these key things on a cadence of you're choosing weekly or monthly, you're going to start getting an understanding of of the decisions that I've made most recently that I think were the right calls to make, did they work or did they not work, and why? So yeah, so how does our funnel change from week on week and month on month off the back of these marketing mix decisions? Let's go through a couple of super tangible examples so that you can understand not just different decisions that we might make to change the marketing mix, but also how I'd measure them and then how I'd interpret the data to tell me whether or not it was effective or profitable or not. So here's a live example. So I've got a couple of what if scenarios here, and I've just put in some figures so that we can kind of work with them and understand what that would mean. So a live example of if we were to run a new promotion, so let's say it's a discounted promotion, some kind of promotional offer of some sort, and then we run that campaign messaging across all channels, not just one, just all of them. So you'll see that in the brand awareness and opportunity section up the top here, I've got an increase largely across these channels, and you can see the percentage increase figures there. So if you're measuring month on month or year on year or week on week, you can see what percentage increase you were seeing off the back of the change that you made. From there, we can then kind of understand what flow on effect that had. So when I increased my budget and changed the campaign messaging to say, 20% off sale for jumpers, what impact did that have down the funnel? So you can see that it's changed sort of the number of Facebook lead ads that were submitted and online inquiries. Probably not online inquiries for a jumper, but let's say buying shutters or something, buying shutters to fit out my house. So what we can see in this example is that the outcome might have seemed like it was a positive one, but I mean, that really sort of depends on what your goal was. So here we can see that the promotion drove a really high volume of sales. Like, this is riddled with positive uplifts throughout the funnel. But then what we can see is the average revenue per sale was actually lower than what we'd run previously. So what this tells us, and with our benchmarks, is, we drove more eyeballs. It definitely drove a higher volume of people through our funnel, but it didn't necessarily increase our revenue and didn't move the needle. So then we ask ourselves, was that promotion that we ran profitable? Was it effective, or was it not? So there's one example. Yeah. A second example is if we nurtured the middle of the funnel. So this is something that I see happen a lot with organizations that already have quite a lot of demand. So if you happen to have stumbled across a phenomenon, one of our clients is a client that does online shutters, and you can purchase them online, you measure the whole thing out, and then delivery, they're just getting so much attention, and people love the product, so they're filling the top of the funnel very well and very cost effectively without having to do much at all. So for them, it's really about how do we optimize the middle of the funnel, and for that, it's all about retargeting. So let's dial up the spend in all of our retargeting ads, and let's spend a lot of money on or even a lot of time investment in creating really gorgeous email nurture funnels, even invest in some personalization to kind of make that customer experience really seamless. If we're optimizing the middle of the funnel, the whole hypothesis here is, can we convert them more effectively if we do more of those sort of nurture pieces? So here we can see that clearly, like, the opportunity to prospect after dialing up retargeting worked really well. The prospect to engagement, not quite as well. And then overall, it's interesting to see that the total prospecting opportunities went up, they increased, but the sales team converted less in this instance. So they converted less to more appointment and action. And one of the things that I remember doing in my last role at Melbourne Sports Centres, we had a similar style of business where we had to drive marketing qualified leads, and then we'd send those leads to a sales team to have that sales team convert them into action. And what we often found was, no matter how many more leads we sent, they were capped at the number of staff that they had that were available to sell those leads. Likewise though, and I just want to throw this out there as another example, because it's these kinds of questions that we have as marketers when we're constantly managing our campaign activity. Another option of what could have happened is perhaps The months prior, we were running a campaign where we had a really heavy top of funnel, and because of that, we weren't converting them as efficiently, or maybe there was a lot of backlog in the sales team's agenda. So maybe they had a very long list of people that they needed to get through. And as a result, maybe we've increased our email activity and our retargeting to try to sort of nurture those people through and encourage more inbound calls so that we are prioritizing the people who are really hot to buy. Maybe that was part of the initiative. And if that's the case and we're still not converting those people more, perhaps it's not working yet, but perhaps it also means we need to wait a little bit longer to get a little bit more data before we rule this one out. So I just want to give that as another example, as to remember that when we're viewing this reporting activity is also important, and our ability to understand if the test needs a little bit longer to run before we make a decision about whether we pause it and go, that wasn't effective activity, or if we continue to run it. So the final example I just want to run through here is in relation to just a Facebook specific example to make things a little bit simpler. So if we were to, and this is something that I do for clients and help them with often on an ongoing basis. So if you're looking at making sure that every move you make is more profitable, this is a really great way to be helping you manage your mix. One thing that we'll often do is we'll run structured tests. So we'll go, okay, for a period of 2 weeks specifically, we're going to just run a test across our Facebook activity alone. We're going to start targeting people based on interest targeting to try to understand if there's a new audience that could exist. So let's say we've never targeted, or we think that we might have a bit of a tradie market, but we've never actively gone after them before. If we were to take 25% of our budget, turn it up into Facebook specifically, into Facebook interest targeting options, and then kind of watch and see what happened through the funnel as a result, that would be an interesting way to discern whether or not it worked and whether or not there is a new market there that perhaps we hadn't considered previously. All really interesting things. And I remember at the Interactive Minds conference event last year, there was a speaker who, I can't remember their name, but who mentioned something that was really interesting to me. They said, marketers so often tie up a lot of their budget in remarketing, but there's an argument to say that a percentage of those people would have purchased from you anyway. So that's a great reason as to why we might kind of consider going, okay, let's go a little bit more top of funnel and see whether or not that is a better investment of our budget. And I think it's interesting because there's no sort of silver bullet moves in marketing. We are playing an infinite game every day. The environment's changing. Look at what's happened sort of with COVID-19. That's completely changed the environmental impacts and the state of play that we're all dealing with. So with that in mind, there is no set and forget. It's this game every day. And because of that, being able to constantly be tweaking the level of investment we have across each channel and the decisions that we're making is important. But what's more important is making those decisions and then measuring the impact. And for me, this is the way that we can measure that impact and actually see, okay, did that change that we make work or did it not work? And it's because we're watching, did people come down the funnel? How quickly did they come down the funnel? Like at what level of effectiveness, by looking at these percentage benchmarks, but then also how much did they spend and were they cost effective for us to bring that through? So in this instance, and with this sort of data that I've thrown together here, we can see that with a 2-week isolated channel test on Facebook, it led to an increase in awareness by like 50%. We saw 50% uplift in our awareness and opportunity on our Facebook outreach, which is huge. But with that, the prospecting only kind of sat at 21% and action only at 6%. So we saw it increase a little bit, but then there's an argument to say, was it enough? Was it worth it? We did certainly find a new market, but it only moved the needle slightly. Now, as a marketer, you now have 2 decisions that you could make, really. You could kind of go, okay, there is something there, and there's a version of us finding the right sweet spot amount of spend and right level of targeting to try to find and convert them more cost effectively. So maybe, for example, reallocating $10,000 was too much, but what if we reallocated $2,000? Would that make this a more cost-effective exercise? That could be the next test that you run, or you could just decide that that market's not for you. But these are the decisions that we get to make, and we get to make these calls once we're measuring these things ongoing. So how do we make these better channel mix decisions ongoing? I wanted to talk about just quickly how this is different business to business. So, you know, these examples are clearly just for a business that is trying to drive marketing qualified leads, and then, you know, you have a sales team executing off the back of that. But regardless, every business is in a different state, and, you know, you'll need to make different decisions off the back of that. So, for example, if the most cost-effective channels that you have running make up a really small percentage of your overall market share, we should invest 100% of our budget that we can into that channel. So by that I mean, like in the example, like I said before, if you have a percentage of users who are really cost-effective to acquire, but there's a small number of them. There's not that many of them. Let's just make sure that we've exhausted our budget and really tried to find where those people are and spend as much as we can on acquiring them, because we know they're cheap to acquire and they spend a lot. But there might not be heaps of them. They might not be the majority of our market. And if you stick with me, I'm really interested to potentially do another webinar. There's another reporting view that we run, which is about trying to understand that in more granularity. So getting really clever around your existing target sets and understanding who is the most profitable market in the suite of people that you're looking at. So that's a really interesting one too. And let me know, like maybe in the chat, if that's something you'd be interested in listening to, and we can do a webinar on that in the coming weeks as well. Another example is if you've got some market segments and channels that create a more compelling case for a prospect, so like a message that's really resonating with them, that person might like convert much faster than somebody that takes weeks to convert. And if you're a business that lives and dies on cash flow, and cash flow is super important to you, and that's your next like end of financial year target, or the OKRs that you're looking at, then that is definitely something that you might need to consider. So while we don't have a crystal ball at all, an intelligent gaps analysis and forecasting gets us close to a confident prediction of our future state. So now it's time to talk gaps analysis, measuring those gaps and forecasting the return that we want to see next year when we're setting our goals. So just a super quick recap on KPIs, OKRs, and lead and lag metrics. So OKRs are those forward-looking goals. So popularized by Facebook and Google and Intel, very sort of techie in nature. And some businesses don't call them OKRs, they might just call them their big, hairy, audacious goal, or they might just call them their financial year targets. But regardless of what they are, that's sort of what we have set for us and we need to work backwards from. And then our KPIs assess our performance that exists now or has already happened in the past. And then this relates to, like, we use the language in sort of data geeky land. We call them lead indicators and then lag indicators. So lead indicators are metrics that help us understand and forecast future impact. Like, if I know that my conversion rate is going to be this, I can tell that my forecasted revenue will be this. So lead indicator, forecasted revenues, your OKR or your lag indicator, and your conversion rate is going to be your lead indicator or your KPI for your team. And this is why this is important, because it allows us to set more effective KPIs and keep our team accountable to them. So what I did last year after running my channel performance, I've had a look at what my funnel was doing at a point in time. Then I kind of backtracked and thought about some of the campaign decisions that I made and took various snapshots throughout the year to give me an understanding of what was working and what wasn't working for me. Then I just spent a whole bunch of time ideating all of the ways that I could cut that mix and cut that budget that I was given to hit the targets that I was provided. So we always work backwards from here, and I do have a KPI matrix, which I'll pop in the email as a follow-up to this tomorrow, which talks to, basically just provides an exact matrix of working backwards from whatever those OKRs are. So if your OKR is improving cash flow, there will be a series of the lead metric and potential KPIs that you could set for yourself or your team in order to achieve that outcome. So I'll send that over just so that you don't have to do all of the thinking yourself. I tend to record and process everything that I tend to create so that I don't have to do it again. So very happy to share it with anyone who might benefit. But in the instance here, I've just got a couple of examples. So let's just say our attention-based Facebook campaigns. For FY20, our budget for this was $40,000 and our current conversion rate was 5.6%. If we propose a change that we increase our budget to $60,000 and we increase our target KPI to 7%, what that would do to your forecasted revenue. So again, all of this can be forecasted easily with your spreadsheet, and it's just a case of kind of looking at what worked for you last year, getting an understanding of, okay, so it looked like our Facebook campaigns were a high performer for us last year. And it was interesting to see how quickly we got people to move through the funnel there. I think that if I took a little bit of money from our YouTube pre-roll, which I've got as the second example here, and reinvested it into our Facebook advertising campaigns, I think it's realistic that I might see an increase in performance over the year with optimization and with working through the messaging and with constantly iterating versions. And that's an achievable KPI. So I've turned that sort of big, scary OKR into something that I think might actually be achievable for us as a team. And then it's just about, I've got a KPI for my team, that KPI is 7%. We are working towards 7%, and month on month, if we're at 5.8%, why, what happened, what environmental impacts were at play, and how can we work towards getting there? Because I know that I need to maintain a 7 in order to hit my goal. It also allows you to go, if that's just clearly not happening for you, we need to think bigger. We need to think differently. That was not the channel that's going to work. We need to try a new one. But it empowers you to make those decisions. So now that we've kind of got those examples, we need to just map the gaps so that we can know exactly how to explain it to our boss and potentially renegotiate if we need to. So if you're in a position where you can renegotiate budget, or you're your own boss and you get to set it, then this is a good way to kind of think about it with an accountability sort of mindset. So if your channel mix and the rate of conversion remained the same, the forecasted outcome with a total budget of $500,000 next financial year would be this. So if you look at your current state of play that we just mapped, you can easily forecast that if the budget didn't change, or the budget that you've been given for next financial year, if nothing changed, where you would be from a revenue perspective. So if that, then you can measure the difference between what that would be and where the business has told you you need to be. So let's say that's 28% below target. Then you've got 28% worth of initiatives to make up for. So to reach that target, the conversion effectiveness, you can create yourself a KPI for the conversion rate and effectiveness that you need holistically as a benchmark to hit that next financial year and to go for. And then, you know, if you have a team, this is an awesome opportunity to be able to empower the team to go, how can we problem solve this together? Especially because everyone has their own remit and their own KPIs that they're responsible for hitting. So it can be a really great way to encourage just ideation. I mean, I certainly am not the only keeper of great ideas. I know that being able to collaborate and work with our teams has resulted in some of the best strategies that we've ever come up with. So really enjoy that kind of stakeholder engagement side of things in this process as well. So the final thing is, well, now that we've done all the hard work and we've dived into our data, we understand where we are, we've mapped our gaps from where we need to be, or how realistic or not realistic it was, how can we win over the boss? So I love this quote by Carly Farina from HP, and she says, the goal is to turn data into information and information into insight, which I just love. So Whether you're trying to use analysis as leverage to renegotiate your targets or your allocated budget that you've been given, or if you simply are just wanting to go and pitch to the boss the merit in your strategy that you've come up with, we need to win over the boss and gain approval to make our newly identified super profitable moves that we know are going to work. So I just wanted to wrap things up by sharing how I've been able to tell a compelling story with data and what's worked well for me. So the biggest thing is this, and I come across this all the time with most of my clients as well, is we are so interested in some of the channel tactics and a lot of the channel attribution metrics that tell us about how well Facebook is doing versus, you know, all of the other channels that we have in play, but that's not necessarily what we need to be sharing with our C-suite. So reporting up is all about that holistic marketing attribution view, which we've just covered. Reporting down is very much channel attribution. And again, let me know in the chat if you're interested in the channel attribution kind of report and how we map channel attribution against the customer journey to understand which channels specifically are driving that outcome and then how to optimize them better. Because I love talking about this stuff, obviously, and sharing all things data. So we'd be very happy to talk about that as well. But reporting up, we just need to remember who we're talking to. So our boss is thinking, I need to see how we're on track to meet our goals, if we are, and do we have the right people in the right roles to help us achieve those goals that I've set. I've set the vision for the business. Are we on track or are we not? Reporting down to our team, as my manager, I need you to give me the context for how my piece, like if I'm running Facebook ads, how my piece contributed to our wider vision as a team and whether I'm on track or what I need to look out for in order for us to stay on track. Like, hey, boss, I'm just not even close to that 7% conversion rate on Facebook. What can we do together to reach that and to get there? So this is something that I like to do to help onboard my stakeholders with that as a concept. And I call it my sort of data storytelling arc. We can't speak to channel metrics without first explaining how the mix of channels relate to achieving that vision. Because again, if we focus on just one channel in isolation, we miss the bigger picture and we miss what we're trying to achieve. And if you're like me and you've spent maybe allocated $80,000 to a new website build project, that website doesn't have a direct ROI. So being able to speak to that holistic contribution of what you're trying to achieve from a customer experience perspective, and really, again, constantly measuring that rate, the rate of flow through the funnel. Do we have a higher percentage of people converting through each layer that we've built? Whether we created a brilliant website, whether we had a video that was so compelling that it moved people to action faster and they didn't even need to go through engagement. They just went straight from the video to walk straight into their store and buy. Regardless, your ability to make those decisions and then communicate how effective those decisions were is the way that you get to win and that the boss is happy as well. So the first thing I do is I introduce my report by recapping the vision that my boss has set for me. So he set the vision for what he wants this business to achieve and where it needs to be, probably along with the board. And our ability to kind of recap that we acknowledge and we understand what that is and what marketing's role is in that is the best way to kind of recap that conversation, or it has gone down well for me. The climax is all about how can we talk to the performance of the current projects that I have in place. So I might have a dozen projects that I'm tackling over the course of the year, but depending on the point in time that I'm talking to my boss, I'll talk about whichever ones are in play right now. So we're currently building the website. This is how close we are. Current website conversion rate is this. We expect an uplift to be this, or this is what we're aiming for post delivery. And I'll measure for you and let you know where that is when it's live. In addition to all of the always on tactics we might have, where Facebook, we have a goal of 7%, we're nearly there, etc. And then the resolution. So how we can talk about our alignment of the KPIs to the OKRs and whether or not we're on track or not. So again, depending on who you're talking to and what decisions that we might need to make, it might be a case of if we have a team member that's not hitting their KPIs, or we're working with an agency that's not hitting KPIs that we've set for them, then it's a management discussion, right? So we need to be able to kind of understand why that is or is not happening, and how can we support them in their journey to hit it. And if we've really exhausted all the options there and we feel like everyone is on balance working very hard and exhausting every opportunity to hit that, then perhaps we need to think about the fact that the KPI wasn't realistic at this point in time, or there's been environmental impacts like COVID that have changed the game. And then what we need to do with our other KPIs to supplement. How do we pivot? How do we get clever and keep moving? So the final thing is just giving you a bit of a checklist for moving forward. So we kind of talked about grouping all of the channels into the marketing mix attribution view and benchmarking your current state. As I said last year, I also went back in time and did it a few times just because I hadn't been doing it, and I just had this light bulb moment of that's how I want to measure effectiveness. And so I reactively did it as well, which gave me a really great picture to hit the ground running the next financial year. The second thing was to consider those targets. So what are the OKRs I've been given? How can I set effective KPIs for my team and my agencies so that they are genuinely forecasted to hit those OKRs? We've got lead metrics, we've got lag metrics. We know that if we hit these, we will hit these. And again, I can totally go into more detail around exactly how I set that up, but I have the matrix that I've already built, which I'll send over in the pack that I email to everyone tomorrow. The third thing is, how do we shake out like what's realistic and what's not here, and then either renegotiate timeline, objective, KPI, or if we are working with a stakeholder that just goes, this is it, you have to pull out a miracle, then great. How do we pull together the entire team and get and empower the team through data and constant measurement in order to help us achieve that? One of my favorite things to do for clients is to build like a data war room, so we can actively see this. When data is empowerment, and I think people are either terrified of it if they're not in that sort of growth mindset of knowing that it's just something that gives us an indication of whether or not we're on track. But if you can empower your team with a discussion around, all this does is help us understand how the decisions that we made could be better as opposed to were necessarily wrong, then it can be one of the most powerful things that you'll ever do for your team and for your organization, and a way to just feel really happy at work as well. Or maybe that's just me because I just love data. And then the final thing is we get to finesse our strategy and win over the boss and get the blessing to start executing on the strategy that you've built that you know will work based on the decisions that you've made in the past, the ones that you could see were effective, the ones that you can see weren't effective, and what you might do moving forward. And after all of this, if you do all of this and you're still kind of feeling like you can't hit your targets and your budget performance, then yeah, it's just a case of seeing if you can find a partner to work with you. And, you know, of course, like SBT is one of those partners that would love to work with businesses that are on the bus with this kind of ongoing engagement and accountability in marketing. Then working with someone who can help you understand through every step and every decision that you've made, how could we make it better? How could we improve it? So I just love this quote, and I just wanted to sort of wrap up with this. Seth Godin says, measurement is fabulous unless you're busy measuring what's easy to measure as opposed to what's important. And the good thing is, as I said, like tomorrow you'll have a template in your inbox that you can use that will build those funnels for you in a Google Sheet. So you can get started with this today. The biggest thing is about your ability to allocate what you see as being awareness activity, engagement activity, action activity, and then, you know, discerning for you which are those most important channels to track. And if you have any questions about that, super happy to talk about, you know, what give you a lot of different examples or talk about what would work for you best. The other thing that I just wanted to talk about quickly is the difference between the static version and like having a live version of these dashboards. So as I said, you can get started on this immediately and tomorrow, and taking a snapshot view can be hugely valuable, and it's much more valuable than having nothing. But we know that these percentages can change daily. There's environmental impacts that are happening all the time. And for me, the most effective way to measure all of our activity is to be able to have access to live dashboards if we can. The biggest thing that I hear from everyone that I work with is that it feels like it's impossible. Like, I don't know about you, but most of the organizations I've worked in, none of the systems talk. You know, we've got an email provider, we might have a CRM, we've got things all over the place. And I totally get it. But what I do know, because I've done it many times before now, there is a way to centralize it, or at least centralize the most important information that we need to get the data that we need out of it, that help you make more important, effective decisions for your business and for your team. So it is possible. And if you want to talk about your specific use case and how we could make that easier for you and empower you with a live dashboard that helps you make better decisions, then definitely get in touch. So if, like, we are on the 23rd of June now, if all of this feels like heaps to do between now and then, I did want to just kind of offer anyone who is really strapped for time an option. We have a little bit of capacity before the end of the year, Evan and I, to run just a couple of reports if there's anyone who feels like this would be beneficial to you and you're not kind of interested in DIYing and you just want to outsource the whole thing. So I'm going to give you everything that you need to DIY it. But if you just need the extra pair of hands, then we are here to be able to do that. So we just do, for context, marketing attribution and then the channel attribution reporting. We also look at market opportunity analysis. So what I mean by that is trying to discern, of all of the people we're targeting on Facebook, who of them were young females between the age of like 25 and 35 who are motivated by price and etc. versus our you know, middle-aged females who are mothers and more highly motivated by other things, but have larger disposable incomes and typically spend more at the end of the funnel. So when we work with our clients, we go through all of this sort of marketing attribution, channel attribution, but then we also look at taking it to the next level, which is really starting to understand who is spending the most with you and how can we maximize opportunity across that. We also look at data acquisition and sort of hygiene and centralization. So if your data is all in a bit of all over the place, centralizing it, but then cleaning it up and making sure that it's actually meaningful and giving you what you need is always an option. And it's usually where we often start, especially if we're working with businesses that have been around for a long time and need to clean things up. Things have just been around for too long and need a little bit of hygiene. So yeah, if you're running out of time, we are happy to kind of be that extra pair of hands if you need it. Super happy for you to DIY and we'll give you everything that you need to do that. Also super happy for you to get in touch if you've got any specific examples that you need, or you just want to run something past me. Genuinely just want to give back. I was super stressed this time last year, and being able to find this and you know, realize that it was working for me was a game changer, and I really wanted to be able to give back to other marketing managers who were dealing with that. But if you are really strapped for time, you just need it done, you've got your boss breathing down your neck, and you want somebody who can just kind of give you a hand with some of this, we are happy to run marketing attribution, all the KPI setting for both you and your team, and the forecasting, just all of it if you need it this week, just before the end of the financial year. But we could only take on a maximum of 4 spots in order to do all of that and get it done by June 30. So if that is you, we're happy to do it, but we need to take it on within the next 24 hours or so. Super happy to have a chat, and I'll have all of this stuff neatly packaged in your inbox tomorrow so that you can work with your teams to DIY it. And if you would like the extra pair of hands, make sure that you touch base with me this afternoon or tomorrow, and then Evan and I can kind of jump in and get started. But it was, I was so appreciate all of you hanging out with me. I love being able to chat about all things data. I was convinced that nobody cared about it as much as I do, but I'm so grateful that that's not the case and that there are a lot of fantastic accountability-driven marketers out there that are wanting to make really fantastic, profitable moves in their mix. So super great to meet all of you, and I will be in your inbox tomorrow. And if you want to have a chat and connect, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and reach out via like the email that I send to you. You can always just hit reply. And yeah, otherwise, I'll be in your inbox tomorrow.